Hi, my name is Kennedy Smith, and this is my speech for the EKU CMS class, and this is my audience. My classmates Vidi Patel and Amaya Campbell, and they're going to be standing to the side while I do my speech. So my speech is on the Great Depression, and it's an informative speech to tell my audience about the worst economic crisis in American history. So the Roaring Twenties were some of the most carefree times for the United States. After World War I, the Roaring Twenties brought a tremendous amount of wealth and fortune to big cities like New York and Chicago. These years were referred to as the crazy years in France. During this time, the economy was booming with new advances such as automobiles, telephones, and film. With so much economic fortune, how could the Great Depression be so soon? The Great Depression was the largest economic crisis in American history, coming in at 10 years. The unemployment rate was at 24.9%, with roughly 12 million Americans unemployed. The Great Depression set a new course of action for the rest of time. The Great Depression has always intrigued me, and I've read many articles and researched extensively on the Great Depression, and I feel educated enough to speak on this topic. So first, I will discuss how the Great Depression began and events leading up to it. Second, I will discuss the effects of the Great Depression during, and finally, I will discuss the aftermath of the Great Depression. So, the Great Depression began mainly because of two major events. The first was a small stock market crash in late March of 1929, and the second was a large crash in October of 1929, referred to as Black Thursday. So on March 25, 1929, a small stock crash occurred, but it was able to be managed. Although it was stabilized, the signs of economic decline were ignored, and stocks steadily declined through September of 1929. At the end of September, stocks were dangerously low. And on Thursday, October 24th, referred to as Black Thursday, it was the first major decline in stocks in a short period of time. So on Black Thursday, the stocks dropped by 11%, and on the following Monday, Black Monday, they dropped another 12%. All efforts to stabilize the market failed, and the next day, Black Tuesday, stocks continued to drop another 11%. After extreme efforts, they were able to recover about 12% of the stock's loss, but after many years, the stock market had lost about 90% of its value. And then in 1930, a bank run of the Bank of the United States left the bank with not enough money to pay back their clients, which forced them to fail. A bank run is when a mass amount of people come to a bank to withdraw money in fear of the bank losing it and failing, which leaves the bank with not enough money to function. Banks balance people's money to pay loans and get withdrawals. So with no money in the bank, loans could not be paid and people lost a lot of their money. And in this particular bank run, they lost a total of $550 million in deposits. So now that I've discussed the start of the Depression, these are the things that came from it during it. So it left millions of people unemployed, homeless, and famished. During the Great Depression, the unemployment rate went from nearly 0% to almost 25%. Because of the money lost in the stock market crash, millions of people were left with their money gone. Businesses lost money, forcing them to close, so even more lost their jobs and were unable to find another one. There was not enough money to open a new business. Any new businesses and existing businesses either closed or struggled to stay open because of lack of money to pay workers. Millions of people also lived in poverty. Homes were lost because people struggled to pay for their houses. Houses that were in construction were halted and never started again. And by the time the 10 years was over, they were mostly decayed. So most people lived in those unfinished houses, abandoned houses, and communities of shacks called Hoovervilles, named after the current president at the time, Herbert Hoover. Many people also left their cities to try to find better opportunities for money, which left them homeless, traveling around looking for more opportunities. Inflation was one of the biggest issues during the Depression because groceries were not able to keep workers, and therefore they could not be fully stocked. Groceries also struggled to stay open because many people didn't have enough money to even afford any groceries at all. They often had stands outside of stores with really, really long lines, offering like cans of beans and like just anything that people could put together. So companies were not able to pay to get certain foods, so the options were slim, and most of what was available was potatoes and random cuts of meat. There was not really any variety or choice. So some people also planted gardens to get their own vegetables and fruit, but with the climates in mostly like New York, it was really cold during the winter and like just bad weather, so they died a lot. Also, milk was super popular during this time, but it was really, really expensive because of inflation, and during the Depression, the consumption declined 1 million gallons a day. So now that we've learned about the start of the Depression and its effects, we can learn about the aftermath and how they attempted to fix it. So the president at the time of the end of the Depression was Franklin D. Roosevelt. Because it lasted 10 years, they elected a new president during the Depression. So Roosevelt put together something called the New Deal, which allowed for domestic funding that brought relief to unemployed workers and suffering families. The New Deal was a $41.7 billion fund, and most of the funding went to domestic programs that helped unemployed workers get back on their feet. So a lot of jobs were created for the unemployed workers, and also to help better the economy and to help go forward. So they created more bridges and more roads to help transportation, and overall the New Deal offered over 20 million jobs to unemployed people. So it also established more security for banks. After the Depression, people were told that if banks were to collapse again, the federal government would pay them back. This was because of the Glass-Steagall Banking Reform Act, which made this possible. It gave banks and depositors peace of mind that they could give out loans, that they could take their money, and that they would always get it back. And it prevented bank runs because there was no panic in losing all of your money from the bank like they did before. And it still affects society today because it established programs such as the Social Security program, which helps manage retirement, the Security and Exchange Commission, which oversees transactions to help prevent fraud from investment advisors or mutual funds. Minimum wage was also established during the New Deal, and it created a baseline pay for every worker that can't go below. So overall, the Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in American history, and I've discussed the events leading up to it, why it happened, what happened during it, and the aftermath of how they attempted to fix it. And yeah.